Apple just agreed to pay its single biggest rival around $1 billion a year, and what it bought is the brain of the iPhone. Everyone is calling this Apple admitting defeat. The real cost is bigger than that headline, and it isn't the money. At its developer conference on June 8th, Apple rebuilt Siri from the ground up and rebranded it Siri AI. The intelligence running underneath is no longer Apple's. It is a custom version of Google's Gemini, a model reported to sit in the trillion parameter range. And according to Bloomberg's reporting, Apple is paying Google somewhere around $1 billion a year for it. The two companies actually struck this deal quietly back in January, so WWDC was really just the public unveiling. To protect its privacy promise, Apple runs Google's model inside its own private cloud compute on Apple Silicon, so that Google reportedly never touches user data. It was Tim Cook's last keynote as CEO, and he used it to admit, on stage, something Apple had spent a decade insisting would happen. The company that wanted to own every layer of its products is now renting the most important new one from a competitor. So who actually wins here? And it is not just the obvious answer. Google takes the $1 billion, of course, but the money is the least interesting part of this. Gemini now sits behind the assistant on more than 1 billion iPhones, and it already powers Android. In a single deal, Google became the default intelligence layer for almost the entire mobile world. And there is a quieter win sitting underneath that one. The pickiest, most self-reliant buyer in all of technology evaluated every option on the table and concluded that Google had the best foundation model available. That is a stamp of validation money cannot buy. Now look at who loses. The obvious casualty is OpenAI. Back in 2024, Apple put Sam Altman on stage and made ChatGPT the AI on the iPhone. As of this deal, ChatGPT is demoted to one optional plugin that a user has to go and choose, while Gemini quietly handles the system-level work by default. OpenAI spent 2 years behaving as if the iPhone were its distribution channel, and Apple just took it back. But there is a less obvious loser here, and it is Apple itself, because the layer it just outsourced is the layer that is becoming the actual product. Here is the incentive that shift. Tower's story for 30 years was vertical integration. They make the chip, the operating system, the hardware and the services, so that everything works together and nobody else gets leverage over them. That story just broke at the most important new layer there is. The intelligence of the device is now rented from a rival, and you cannot fully control what you do not own. Which brings us to what tends to break over the next 6 to 12 months. And I would watch 3 things. First, the privacy line gets much harder to hold. Technically, private cloud compute may genuinely keep Google out of user data, and that is a real engineering achievement worth respecting. But Apple's AI is powered by Google's model, is a sentence Apple spent 10 years and an enormous marketing budget trying never to have to say. The architecture and the brand promise are now pulling in different directions, and you can be sure competitors will hammer on that gap. Second, antitrust attention intensifies. Apple already pays Google around $20 billion a year to be the default search engine in Safari, and that arrangement is already under legal fire. Now the same 2 companies control the AI layer that sits on top of search. Regulators in the United States and Europe were already uneasy about how cozy Apple and Google have become, and this hands them a second, bigger reason to look closely. When the 2 most powerful gatekeepers in mobile keep partnering at every new layer, the pressure does not add up, it compounds. Third, and this is the one Apple will feel in its own wallet, dependency pricing. $1 billion a year is the introductory rate. Once Siri AI is woven through the entire ecosystem and 1 billion people rely on it every day, Apple's leverage in the next negotiation goes down, not up. Google can raise the rent on the one thing Apple cannot quickly rebuild. Apple kept the model weights on its own servers, partly so that it could swap Google out later. But swapping the brain of a shipped assistant that 1 billion people use daily is nothing like a clean switch. The longer it runs, the more locked in Apple becomes. Here is what almost nobody is talking about. This whole story is being framed as Apple losing the AI race, and that framing misses the real shift. The battle in AI was never only about which model is the smartest. It is increasingly about which model is the default, the one that 1 billion people never choose but use every single day. Google just won the 2 biggest defaults on the planet, Android and now the iPhone, and the overwhelming majority of those users will never once type the word Gemini. Apple even built in a model picker that lets you select ChatGPT or Claude, which looks like openness, except the system-level work, the agent actions and the background reasoning, still runs on Gemini by default. Choice on the surface, Google underneath. The competition just quietly moved from best model to default distribution. And that is the game Google is built to win, and OpenAI is not. So here is the verdict. Substance. This is real, not marketing. Apple shipped a Gemini-powered Siri and is paying a real price for it. So treat this as a structural admission, not a demo. Who it helps? Google, which now owns the default intelligence layer of mobile, and Apple users, who get a far better assistant in the short term. Who it threatens? OpenAI, which just lost the iPhone, along with Apple's own long-term independence and its privacy story. What changes in 6 to 12 months? Antitrust pressure grows, Apple's negotiating leverage erodes, and just buy the best model becomes the default posture across the industry. The blind spot. The real war is over defaults, not model quality, and Google now owns both mobile defaults. One-line verdict. Apple did not just buy a smarter Siri, it handed its biggest rival the one position in AI that compounds, being the default a billion people never chose. So here is the question I will leave you with. If the company that swore it would never depend on a rival just did exactly that, is owning your whole stack even possible in the AI era? Or is everyone a renter now? Tell me in the comments. Next, we look at how Google is using that same default power to quietly kill the click in search, and why that breaks the open web.